Good morning. Welcome to our Wednesday devotional. I've often heard it said on TV, on radio, and actually in life, if you want to know what the motive for something is, follow the money. I remember Rush Limbaugh used to often say that when he was talking about governmental problems and governmental fraud and even dishonesty. He would say, follow the money. People are doing this for the money. Follow the money. That's a sad commentary on the way people are, the way people live. But years ago, when King Solomon recorded the Proverbs, he made a similar statement in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 4. He said, labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Labor not to be rich. I don't know why you work at your job, or used to, probably just to provide a living. But if your motive was to be rich, then he's really talking to you. Let me share this with you. Sometimes Christians fall into these same traps. Somebody says, well, I'm not rich. I certainly wouldn't be laboring to be rich. Let me give you 3 thoughts and see if this helps us have perspective this week. First thought is this: be careful about motives. Be careful about motives. I've had the privilege of not really worrying much about money. I grew up, we didn't have much, and when I went to school, I barely scraped by. And in fact, as a college student, I remember thinking, I want to be in full-time ministry, but at that time in the 1960s, there were very few, if any, Christian schools, so the possibility of working on a staff in a Christian school was very remote. I never even thought about it. The church I'd come from was a pretty good-sized church, but it only had 2 staff people. One was the pastor, one was the secretary. And I knew I didn't want to be the secretary, and I didn't feel that God was calling me to be a pastor. So I was trusting the Lord for some kind of a ministry, some kind of a position that wouldn't be the pastor or the secretary, but would provide a full-time living through the ministry. Well, as it was, God gave me that. But at that time, while I was in college in the 1960s, I began to think I'll never make a big income because I won't be the pastor. And if I ever achieve an income of $10,000 per year, I would have hit the roof. I would have really, really, really scored big. I wasn't really following the money. I want to just remind you, whatever kind of income you have, be careful about the motives. What are you looking for? What are you trying for? Be cautious about the motives. Second thing is this. He says, labor not to be rich. Second thing is this. Trust God to supply your needs. Here's what I see sometimes, and I'm really baffled by this. People who are believers who say, I've trusted Christ for my salvation. That means you've trusted him for eternity. You've trusted him with your life. You've trusted him with eternity. You've trusted him. You've put faith in him. And then we live and seem like we can't trust him to supply our needs tomorrow. There's something wrong with that picture. We trust him for salvation. We ought to trust him to be able to supply our needs and take care of the things that we need in our lives. In fact, very likely some of you listening who are believers could tell me stories of how God has provided for your needs in your life. Times past when this thing didn't seem to be able to work out, and yet God worked it out for you. It may have been financially, it may not have been. I had something happen just last week that was pretty neat. Our heat went out at home. I got home on Friday night, and the temperature was already way below what it was set at. So I did the little few things I know. I went and looked for some kind of a reset button and couldn't find one, and I went out and kicked the heat pump or something, and there's just not much I know to do when heat doesn't work. So Saturday morning I tried to call the people who had serviced our heat one time before. They were out of business. So I called another place, and they came, and a pretty hefty charge for coming. But that man, after looking around and so forth, could not find the problem. He said, I think you need an electrician. Well, it's Saturday. Where am I going to get an electrician? So I called a man that does some work for us here at church, and he came right over. And within 5 minutes, he had found the problem and fixed the problem. I said, thank you so much. And I was expecting, even though he's there for 5 minutes, you have a service call, whatever the charge would be. And he said, no charge. No charge. Wow. God just took care of that. What a blessing it is to know that God will supply our needs. One last thought on this. This is most important. Be thankful for what he gives us. He supplies our needs. He provides for us. Labor not to be rich. Don't make that your motive. Follow the money? No. My advice, God's advice, don't follow the money. Follow the Lord. Labor not to be rich. Now, have a wonderful day and trust God to supply your needs. God bless you.